Warhammer 40k has been around for literal decades, so to say that there's a lot of lore is quite the understatement. Yet for every example of beautiful handcrafting of an amazing IP, there is lore that is questionable, or in some cases, just straight up bad. And ladies and gentlemen, this has caused people to ask the question, what is the worst piece of 40k lore? So I decided to ask all you the question, and y'all gave me your answers. So you can't get mad at me for this video, all these are your answers, except for the last one, that one is my own personal. But yeah, if you got any complaints directed to each other in the comment section, it'll be good for the algorithm too. But ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, here are 5 of the worst pieces of 40k lore according to you. But enough of my yammering, let's get cracking on with today's video. At number 5, we have CloneGrim. But to know the story of CloneGrim, you gotta know the story of Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children. Now, the lore of Fulgrim is pretty good. Some of the minor details are a bit on the questionable side, but hey, show me a piece of 40k lore that is 100% good. But the fact of the matter is, the core of Fulgrim's story is really good. It's solid. Fulgrim was the perfect Primarch. One of the most tragic moments in the entirety of 40k's story is his slow and terrible fall. He is quite literally the perfect example of how corruption, especially Slaaneshi corruption, takes place. He wanted to do good, he wanted to be good, he felt this insane pressure on him to be the perfect son. His legion were the Emperor's children. If they were not the most perfect, the most best, what could they be? And this desire for perfection drove him further and further and further downward, until eventually he would make a mistake and pick up the wrong habit, or in this case, the wrong sword. And that would lead to his eventual corruption and degradation, going from the most perfect of the Emperor's sons into the most worst. And in modern day 40k, he works quite well as an evil ass murder rape snake bastard. But his story does not end with him doing NSFW things in the warp. For like father, like son. And that brings us to the man who we have to thank for the story of CloneGrim. That being Mr. Fabulous Bill himself, Fabius Bile. Fabius Bile used to be the chief apothecary of the World Eater's Legion. What the fuck? Fabius Bile used to be the chief apothecary of the Emperor's Children Legion, and he would be incredibly important in the Legion's fall. Fun fact, he helped invent the first ever noise marine, known as the Cacophony, and throughout the heresy he would continue to refine his art, becoming one of the greatest flesh crafters and gene enhancers in the entirety of 40k. Thus, it is no small thing to say that he is one of the most eccentric and dangerous men in all of Warhammer 40k, and while he's known for his genetic manipulation, he is much more known for his cloning, specifically of himself and other space marines, which is what brings us to today's topic. Arguably Bile's greatest cloning achievement, a near-perfect clone of his Primarch progenitor, Fulgrim. You see, sometime before M41, Mr. Bill managed to create a perfect clone of Fulgrim. Now this is not the first time, mind you, as he tried to create clones of several other Primarchs, Varys Manus included. However, this time was unique, for this clone was both pure and uncorrupted, said to not have even a little bit of a hint from the warp. Now, how and why this one was different, no one really knows. Not even Fabius himself, though there is a fan theory to this. It is believed that ever since Fulgrim's nonsense with the Demon Blade, his soul has been in the warp, and it is believed that his soul found its way into this demon clone, and it's believed that his soul found its way into this clone. Essentially, for all intents and purposes, this is the brand new Fulgrim, soul and all. Though this sounds like a little bit of coping from people who really want there to be a loyalist Fulgrim. I'm not saying it's untrue, but it seems like a little bit of a stretch, not gonna lie. By the way, for those wondering, all this takes place in the book Clone Lord. Bile then takes his clone underneath his wing, and the clone quickly grows to adulthood. And a unique quirk is that because of the Primarch's genetics, he actually has his memory from the Horus Heresy. Not all of it, mind you, but he can recall certain events, even recognizes some of the old Emperor's children now serving with Bile. What's even funnier is that he actually expresses regret for everything. So much so that it's very heavily hinted that he wants to essentially find atonement not just for himself, but also the rest of the Emperor's children. This comes to a head during a raid on Solminus, in which case CloneGrim would actually take command of the forces underneath Bile and lead them into war. After this, he straight up expressed to every Space Marine that he was going to do stuff. He truly was Fulgrim reborn. And to the Emperor's children, this was a rare glimpse into a chance of redemption. But that was the problem. He truly was Fulgrim, which means that there was a fair chance that he was susceptible to all the things that Fulgrim was susceptible to, at least according to Fabius's mind. And to Fabius, this was something that could not happen. So, Fabius Bile made a deal, but with who and with what? Well, should probably just give you that straight from the horse's mouth. Taken from Fabius Bile, Clone Lord. You cannot conceive of what I made her to do, or what I wished for either of you. He glanced around. Trazen watched with bemused interest. Alcanic stared at him in open horror. Everyone else seemed frozen in the moment. Even the Vesalius seemed holding its breath. Then explain it to me, said Fulgrim. But tell me, and I shall weep for her. To me, she is a warrior, and she suffered a warrior's wound. He reached for his sword. A warrior's wound. Fabius spat. He looked around. An army occupied the bridge. An army made from his creations, but an army loyal to Fulgrim. An army willing to die for Fulgrim, or the thing that wore Fulgrim's face. How had this happened? How had he been so blind? Is that what they are to you? Warriors? Yes, Fulgrim said, as if confused. Your warriors. I led them in your name. And who asked you to do that? Fabius resisted the urge to fire his needler into those two perfect features. He wouldn't get a single shot off before Fulgrim ripped his arm from the socket, or possibly before his own creatures fell on him. He could see the light of newborn devotion burning in their eyes. Primarchs were made to be followed. Only a strong will could resist the emotional pull they exerted. So many dead. So much work wasted. And for what? So Fulgrim could play warrior? Fabius. Alcanic said hesitantly, before Fulgrim could reply. Hoarsely. I knew you were hiding something. But this... I did not expect this. He gazed at the looming clone with an expression of beatific awe. Where did you... When did you do this? What does it matter now? It changes everything, Fabius. He is the Primarch. The Phoenician as he was then. And as he should be now, Fabius said. He looked at Alcanix. Careful, Flavius. The Phoenix would not care to hear you say that. Alcanix shook his head. It does not matter. He exists. He is here. And I... Forgive me. He crumpled with a dull clang. Falling to his knees, he tore off his helmet and held out his sword, balanced across his palms. Fulgrim smiled beatifically. In that moment, Fabius saw the ghost of the true Phoenician in him. Not the hero lost to Chemos, but the arrogant creature who had been so easily seduced by false promises. The monster that valued his own perfection over the lives of his sons. I forgive you, my son, Fulgrim said softly. He looked around. I forgive you all, my wayward sons. He laid a hand on Alcanic's shoulder. I know you, Flavius Alcanix. You were with me at Beas. I remember. Alcanix gripped Fulgrim's hand. Yes, he said. Yes, I was with you. I followed you. I followed you wherever you led. Fulgrim nodded. And will you follow me now, my son? My Primarch, Alcanix said. You are returned to us. Fabius saw he was weeping. Yes, I will follow you. Around them, other Emperor's children were sinking to their knees, moaning in mingled sorrow and longing. Fulgrim looked at Fabius. "The gene tithe, Fabius," he said. "Is it safe?" His eyes blazed with new strength, new awareness. As if the truth of him had been restored in battle, Fabius felt the weight of that gaze and cursed the part of him that responded. "It is," he said, his voice a hoarse rasp. He felt as if he was standing on the edge of some great chasm. One more step would send him plunging into impossible gulfs. "Then we have succeeded," Fulgrim said. "We shall be reborn, my sons. We shall rise, and the galaxy shall rise with us, as it was always meant to do." His words echoed across the deck like soft thunder, and Fabius stepped back from the edge. He looked at Trazyn, standing still and silent nearby. "I would like to amend our bargain. Instead of my clone, take this one." He spoke quickly, not trusting himself to say the words. Something in him shrieked in despair, but he forced it aside. It was necessary. It had to be done. Fulgrim looked at him in puzzlement. "What? Fabius?" He took a step, and Fabius backed away. Fulgrim frowned, a child's frown, confused, hurt. He did not understand. He could not understand. He simply was. "No, benefactor," Ynnari whispered, clutching at him. "Do not do this." "I must. For you. For them all." He could see it now. The madness that had gripped them, him included. He had almost slipped back into the old ways and let the future burn in the fires of the Phoenix's resurrection. His great work. All for nothing. All that had endured. All that he had striven for. Undone before him. Ynnari, his new men. He saw them now, in his mind's eye, bending knee before Fulgrim, abasing themselves. He could not allow it. Could not. "An interesting proposal." Trazyn looked up at the Primarch. "I came close to adding a similar being to my collection many centuries ago. Are you certain?" "He is yours." Fabius rose to his feet, cradling Ynnari to his chest. "I thought he might be of some use, but I see now that I was wrong." Fulgrim flinched, his eyes widening. He retrieved his sword. "Teacher, what are you talking about? I have done all this for you. Are you displeased? What have I done wrong?" "Nothing," Fabius said. The word felt like poison on his tongue. "You have done nothing wrong, but this was a mistake. I must rectify it." Alkenix rose hastily to his feet as well. "Fabius, I do not know what demon's bargain you have made with this creature, but stop. Think. Do not do this. Whatever has gone on between us, do not do this." Fabius ignored him. "Go, Trazyn. Take him and be damned." "Do not take him from us again, Fabius," Alkenix said. "Please." He raised his sword. "Damn you, spider, listen to me." Fulgrim turned, reaching out to stop him, but Alkenix was already moving, his face a mask of grief. Trazyn laughed hollowly and gestured as Alkenix rushed over to Fabius, blades held high. He, Fulgrim, and the rest of the Emperor's children on the bridge froze, as if they were not flesh and blood, but statues. The Primarch still had a puzzled expression on his face, like a child being reprimanded for something he did not understand. Trazyn looked up at him admiringly. "Exquisite." Fabius looked at Trazyn. "Take these others as well if you like. Since they are so eager to join him, it will make a fine collection. The Primarch and his loyal curs." "My thanks, Clone Lord. He is truly excellent, and he will make a fine addition to my collection. Your prize has already been transported to the ship's cargo holds. Take it with my compliments." "Good. Now get off my ship." Trazyn laughed again, a mocking metallic death rattle, and vanished with a rush of displaced air. Fulgrim and the others, vanished with him. Yes indeedy, ladies and gentlemen, as some of you may have known, funny Necron man Trazen himself would strike a deal with Fabius. Instead of taking a clone of him, he would take not only Fulgrim, but all those who were loyal with him in that moment, and disappear off to be hidden for God Almighty knows how long. That then brings us to the issue that y'all seem to have with the CloneGrim lore. The fact that we got a literal perfect clone of Fulgrim, one of the best Primarchs that there was, and the fact that there were several Emperor's children, corrupted Chaos Emperor's children, mind, who were willing to follow him, which could have meant a return to the Emperor's children as loyalists. Because remember, there is roughly 18,000 Space Marines worth of gene seed that Trazen had, uncorrupted Emperor's children gene seed, mind you. Not to mention everything else that could have happened with this story. Instead, we got nothing. Absolutely nothing. Ever since the book Clone Lord, we've gotten zero, nada, nothing concrete at all about what Mr. Necron Sticky Hands has done with the Purple Bird Boy. Clone Lord came out in December 2017, basically 2018, and since then, nada, amigo. And this is why so many people consider this to be terrible lore. The fact that GW has done nothing with this. And this is whether you love CloneGrim or hate him, because the fact of the matter is GW did something this big, and they seemingly just left it. If you wanted CloneGrim back, the fact that he just got shelved makes you super duper upset, because what the hell? If you hate CloneGrim lore, the fact that they just got shelved in the same book, it makes you wonder why. Why GW did you even do this if this is what you were going to do with him? The fact that GW did this and then seemingly forgot about it for 6 years got a lot of people in a tizzy. Or what many people believe is that they chose to forget about it, with GW realizing that they kind of wrote themselves into a corner and then just decided to stay there. And GW has done this stuff before. The amount of open-ended storylines and story arcs and left unfinished characters seemingly forgotten by GW is incredibly massive. So we should be used to this, right? But what really upsets people about this one is the scale. This is a returned Primarch mind, and apparently a perfect Primarch. It's not a case of, oh no, there's actually some chaos corruption or anything to it. This is literally Fulgrim for all intents and purposes. Not actually, but you know, close enough. Thus, to many people, it just seems that having this there was just a unnecessary thing. Again, if you hated it, you asking yourself why they put it, and if you love it, you want to kill GW, asking them why did you do this just to tease us. It feels super unnecessary, and that's the problem. It just feels unnecessary because, you know, we haven't really gotten much to it. But ladies and gentlemen, that's not the end of it, for GW has done this before. But what really upsets people is that he's just there. CloneGrim is in Trazen's vault. CloneGrim is not dead. CloneGrim did not die. CloneGrim's story did not conclude. It's just on hiatus indefinitely. And that's the thing that really just annoys people. And it appears that GW doesn't have the balls to outright get rid of CloneGrim, so they just keep him up there taking parking space, making the rest of us circle the block, hoping we get lucky. And honestly, I have to agree. Because whether you're for loyalist Fulgrim or against it, the fact that they refuse to end the storyline is just really infuriating. And for me, that definitely earns a point as some of the worst lore that 40k has, but more so in its execution rather than the actual content thereof. But from the perfect son to anything but perfect, let's talk about the Grey Knights. Ah yes, the Grey Knights. Now if you've been around the block, you know what infamous incident I'm going to be referring to here. Written by the one and only Matt Ward at the height of bad Space Marine lore, 5th edition. And in said Grey Knights Codex, we get a little story involving a demon, the scissors of battle, and a whole lot of blood and bad writing, which I shall now retail to all of you, taken from Codex Grey Knights, 5th edition. Chaos comes to the Basilica of St. Mariel on the world of Van Horn. The statue of the Emperor is accidentally damaged during the renovation work of the inner sanctum, disrupting the forgotten stasis reliquary within. An ancient prison crumbles to dust. The Bloodthirster, Ka Jagannatha, Lord of the Blood Tide, breaks free. At his bellowed command, a tide of gore washes through the vaults, corrupting everything and everyone it touches. The Basilica's guardians and priests, so recently counted amongst the Emperor's most virtuous servants, roam the nearby streets, seizing helpless citizens to use as blood sacrifices upon the tainted altar. For 8 days and 8 nights, the orgies of gore continue. each fresh death luring yet more demons through the mortal world. Hour by hour, the blood tide spreads further and further across Van Horn. It is estimated that the entire planet will be enveloped in a matter of days. On the morning of the 9th day, the Sisters of Battle from the Order of the Ebon Chalice assault the Basilica. Some battle sisters are corrupted on contact with the blood tide. Those who endure fight valiantly, while most are slaughtered by the bloodletters atop the Basilica walls. It is only when the Grey Knight's Fourth Brotherhood arrives in Van Horn that the blood tide is abated. Needing a talisman of purity to protect against the blood tide's taint, the Grey Knights first act to turn their blades upon the surviving Sisters of Battle. The innocent blood, thus spilled, is then mixed with blessed oils and used to anoint the Grey Knight's armor and weapons. So shielded, the Grey Knights are able to stride through the gore flood without the risk of corruption, and they smash their way into the Basilica's heart. A trio of librarians lead the attack, enunciating the cants of cleansing that repel the blood tide wherever they tread. In the end, Ka Jagath Nath is only defeated through the selfless sacrifice of Ordan, champion of the Fourth Brotherhood. Before Ka Jagath Nath's spirit can escape his ruined body, the Grey Knights are able to cast the demon's dark presence back into the warp, and the psychic backwash banishes the blood tide, and the demons it drew forth. Yeah, this one is pretty self-explanatory. Having a bunch of Grey Knights murder a bunch of Sisters of Battle to get their blood, which supposedly by mixing it with a bunch of sacred oils and covering it in reliquaries and stuff to put on their armor, grants them protection against the greater demon of Khorne, the blood god. So using blood to fight blood, and apparently the blood of the innocent, is what makes it potent. Look, truth be told, I don't know much about Khorne lore, nor do I know much about Grey Knight lore, but that just feels like bullshit to me, I'm not gonna lie. The first thing, the blood of the sisters being innocent is what made it good to repel the gore tide? Like, I get that sisters are faithful and that faith protects them, but the faith is not in their blood. That's the whole point of faith. It's faith. It's supposed to be spiritual, not physical, so their blood wouldn't have any of that. And their blood being innocent and being used against Khorne doesn't really make sense because, you know, Khorne does not care from whence the blood flows so long as it flows. I don't think he gives a shit, really. Also, the innocent blood being spilled, that sounds more like chaos bullshit, yeah? And I know using chaos to fight chaos and all that, but why do the Grey Knights need that? The Grey Knights are supposed to, you know, already have all the shit to fight against greater demons. Like, their whole point is that they're meant to kill greater demons, and they've killed plenty greater demons before this, so you'd think they'd know that this is what they should be fighting? Also, the fact that all this happened because someone accidentally knocked over something? Like, they damaged a statue and apparently that statue was keeping a greater demon hidden? I'm sorry, what? Like, I know this is the Imperium and bullshit is a common nature, but that just feels fucking stupid. Again, right now I may be trying to convince you that the sky is blue, but this just feels bad. And again, it's just it's a feels bad moment to see the sisters get shafted in such a bad way, because imagine you're a sister battle. You don't only survive a demon coming up, nor do you survive a literal demon tide of blood and all his bullshit, nor do you survive fighting off hordes of demons for days. All in all, you think, oh, Grey Knights, we're gonna be okay. And then the Grey Knights just straight up murder you and your sisters to take your blood to use it as a ward against the demon blood? I mean, it's just... Look, I know this is a Grey Knight book, so Grey Knights are supposed to be the ones getting all the good shit, yeah, but what did the sisters do, man? This is just such a feels bad. Yeah, again, I don't really have much to say about this because, well, it's super obvious, man. This is just bad writing. Again, you could maybe try and justify this with some lore, but why would you? Nah. Definitely one of the worst pieces of 40k lore. But moving on from Demons of the Warp to Gods of the Ynnari, let's talk about the next one. So the next one, as voted per you guys, is Ynnari and the whole Ynnari storyline. For the few of you who don't know, towards the end of 7th edition and the beginning of 8th, we got the Gathering Storm series, specifically in the end of 7th. And you know, that story would eventually evolve and continue as we get on to 8th. And there would be a bunch of books there, but they basically set up the return and resurrection of rebooted Guilliman, but more so, the introduction of a new Eldari faction, that being the Ynnari. Now, the Ynnari were essentially a recreation of the Eldar faction of old. For those who don't know, during the Empire of the Eldari, all the various Eldar minor factions, Craftworlds, Dark Eldar, the Clowns, Corsairs, Exodites, they were all one Eldar faction. It's because of the fall of the Eldari Empire and the birth of Slaanesh that all of them had to separate to find different ways of coping with the big bad suck coming to get them. But with the Ynnari, they introduced the idea of Ynni, the Eldar god of the dead, being revived. Essentially, with an Eldar god of the dead, the Eldar souls wouldn't go to Slaanesh, meaning that for the first time in a long time, the Eldar would be safe from Slaanesh. And whilst the many different flavors of elves are very different, they all have one thing in common. They all hate Slaanesh. This was meant to essentially revitalize the Eldar factions. This was meant to be something for everyone. It was the Eldar Reborn, and it came with its own novel series. Finally, the Eldari who had waited for lore for forever would get exactly what they wanted. Except it was not that. You see, as I mentioned before, the whole idea of the Eldari is that they were meant to be for everyone. Literally in this sense. You had popular characters from many different already existing Eldar factions come in and become part of the Ynnari. Jane Zar, Lilith Hesperax, Eldred Ulfwan, just to name a few. These people decided to outright join or help the Ynnari in one way, shape or another, essentially presenting a return to the Eldar of old, but, you know, when you try and please everybody, you end up pleasing no one. And this is what kind of happened. It is widely considered to be a failure of an introduction. Yeah, they were just implemented poorly. And whilst initially the idea seems great, it needed a lot of setup and build up and it did not get that. But speaking of that solid start, let's take a look at it now. Ynni is the Eldar god of the dead, a nascent deity slowly growing with the death of each Eldar. Yet despite this, he also represents the greatest hope of survival for the Eldar race. Foremost amongst the Ynnari is Yvraine, the emissary of Ynni and daughter of Shades. Though Craftworld born, she died in the arenas of Comora, only to be reborn as the High Priestess of the Eldar god of death. Her mission in the dark days of the time of ending is to unite the Eldar to her cause and bring about the full rebirth of Ynni. A silent, imposing warrior known as the Visarch, a vision of the ancient Eldari, aids her in her quest, a constant reminder of what the Eldar were. Enduring above both is the Yinkan, a terrifying psychic manifestation of the collective Eldar spirit, the avatar of Ynni. United, this triumvirate prize to bring about the rebirth of the Eldar race. Now, if you're just hearing that, that sounds cool, right? Oh my god, the Eldar are fighting back finally? Like, they have this chick who was a Craftworlder, but then she died in Comora, which means she was a fighter there, or she was captured, and then she became a priestess, which means she got resurrected. There's this badass warrior dude who apparently is like the old Eldar. And then, oh my god, we have a brand new avatar. The avatar of Cain isn't alone anymore. All these ideas sound great as one or two sentences, but when you get down to brass tacks and details, which is what really make you love a faction, setting, or character, they're lacking. More specifically, in the main book series that compose of these three, a lot of people expressed a fair bit of disdain. They just didn't really like them. They weren't really likable or memorable. And in fact, that goes for the whole books. The Ynnari books were notorious for underperforming. In fact, they underperformed so badly that the third book didn't even get released, meaning that the story literally is left unfinished. And that goes to some of the Ynnari lore as a whole. Like, great idea, but just not enough there. But that wasn't the only reason why people had an issue with it. And by people, I mean the Eldar fans. Because as I said earlier, this was supposed to be something for all Eldar players, but they ended up taking stuff and doing stuff to existing Eldar factions so that the existing Eldar fans were actually pretty miffed. For example, Biel-Tan blew up. Like, yeah, the Craftworld Biel-Tan just straight up blew up. As for the Dark Eldar, Vect outright says that they just hate them. The Clowns don't really get nearly as much as they should, and then you have the Exodites and the Corsairs that are just there. The fact of the matter is, to build up this brand new Ynnari faction, instead of adding to it and adding to the additional existing Eldar units and connecting them like that, they took from the existing Eldar factions to make this faction. And it makes sense, because like, how would you feel if your awesome character from your own faction just up and joined the new kid on the block? It would be like if there was a brand new Primaris chapter that had the ability to resurrect a Primarch, And then Kelgar, Chushan, Gabriel Seth, and Kosaro Khan decide to join up for reasons. And here's the crux, man. And that's the crux of it. Having the ability to resurrect the God of the Eldar is a huge reason for someone to consider joining your faction. But to have them join up suddenly, because remember, these are Eldar, some of these bastards are old. For them to forsake thousands of years of their lives and countless of their fellows should be something long and hard. And that's just for the normal footsloggers, let alone some of the main characters of the bloody faction. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but to all of a sudden just introduce a faction to be like, yeah, these characters just are now together all of a sudden. It's just like, it just didn't really feel right. And honestly, that goes for the Ynnari as a whole. The Ynnari didn't feel right, they didn't feel whole, they didn't feel complete, they didn't feel like an actual faction. In fact, many people complained they just felt like a plot device for the Ultramarines to save the day or for Gilliman to be resurrected. And yeah, that kinda ended up what they became, really. In modern day 40k, the Ynnari are a underdeveloped faction to say the least. I mean, hell, they didn't even get to finish their trilogy, man. Look, I don't blame the elf lovers for not loving this book. And because they didn't love it, they complained about it. Much like how people complained about the Primaris when they were first released. And while GW would eventually go on to change some of the worst parts of the Primaris lore and eventually make them quite nice, unlike, say, the Primaris, GW didn't have to fix the Eldari. They didn't have to fix the Ynnari. So they didn't fix them. And now the Ynnari just exist. GW have essentially put their story on permanent hold forever and always, with Slaanesh now having access to one of the Crone Swords. The Crone Swords are essentially some MacGuffin that are necessary to fully revive Ynni to make him an actual god. So long as they don't have those, no revival, which means nothing really. Yeah, the Ynnari are going nowhere. They're just there. And it's unfortunate. And that's the whole situation really, it's terribly unfortunate. Great ideas, but poor execution, and yeah, you may find gold in that there mountains, but if you don't mine it correctly, it ain't worth jack a diddly boy. But from the worst implemented lore on this list to, objectively, without a doubt, the worst actual lore, let's talk about the next one. So just a quick little warning before I get into this one. If you're someone who doesn't like the topic of assault, abuse, rape, body horror, body dysmorphia, as well as flesh crafting and changing and all that lark, just you might want to skip this one, yeah. So I am talking about the Daemonculaba, that thing. Yeah, this was always going to be on the list. The Daemonculaba was something that was introduced in the Uriel Ventress novels, specifically Dead Sky, Black Sun, written by Graham McNeil, and it includes one of the worst pieces of 40k lore actually. Regardless of what you think about the particular items on this list, this is bad. And some of you may hear some people saying, oh no, the Daemonculaba isn't that bad, it's a necessity thing to chaos. And look, I'm just gonna come out and say it. If you ever meet someone who says that the Daemonculaba is a necessary piece of lore to chaos, yeah, don't talk to them. I was planning to read the excerpt from the book, but yeah, I found that really hard to read. Normally when I do these videos, I try and read a lot of the sources. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even read this. I don't want to read this book. I don't even want to read this excerpt, man. It's just, yeah, you guys will forgive me. Like I'm not someone who's like super sensitive to this kind of stuff, but reading this, I don't want to VA this, man. It's bad. Before I get into what the Daemonculaba is, final warning, if you don't like anything relating to body horror and abuse and all that, just skip it, I don't blame you. But essentially, the Daemonculaba was a mechanism of creating new Chaos Space Marines, created by Hansu, the Iron Warrior's warsmith. And the system began with human female slaves. And they were shackled together, and they were force-fed, nutrients and stuff. They were essentially overfed to the point that their bodies became deformed, and then they would be essentially combined together, and with their insides being altered and their chemistry being changed and recombined to utilize gene seed. Essentially, what would happen is that the gene seed would be placed inside one of the wombs along with a young child, male of course, and then he would be placed living inside of the now enlarged womb. When I say enlarged enough to eventually fit a space marine size in there, which is like 7-8 feet. And then at the end, the process would either transform the child into a, space marine, or some type of skinless foul mutation that would then be thrown into essentially a garbage pool full of other failed stuff. And these new space marines would be born without skin, and then the Iron Warriors would also cultivate male slaves, and they would, torture them so that their skin would grow to incredible lengths, like enough skin to cover an 8-foot tall man. Yeah, and then the slave has his skin cut open and then attaches it to the space marine, and then you get a Chaos Space Marine. Yeah, you'll notice my enthusiasm is non-existent for this part. I do not care for this lore at all. It is wrong. It is one of the, I think it's the only piece of 40k lore that I can objectively say is wrong. And again, I mentioned you have some people who say, oh no, it's important, it's necessary, it perfectly shows chaos, and no, it doesn't perfectly show chaos. Credit where credit is due. This is incredibly excessive and vile, and it's a corruption and a degradation, a malediction of everything that it is to be human. That is what chaos does, that is what evil does, and this is that. This is chaotic, this is evil. Full stop. But it's not necessary, and that's the main thing, it's unnecessary. You can show the corruption and evil of chaos without doing this. You don't need this level of grotesque graphic nature. You don't need this to be done to people to show how bad chaos is. Again, a good example, you need to cut a loaf of bread. You could cut it with a chainsaw, sure, but a bread knife serves just as well. Also, sometimes it can feel a little weird with the woman being involved and that shit specifically. It's bad, man. I don't like it. I can normally read some shit, but when I was reading that excerpt, I was like, that was hard for me to read, man. I don't like this lore one bit, and it's unnecessary. It's absolutely unnecessary. You don't need this at all. And yeah, I don't have anything else to say. This is bad lore. This is the worst lore. Yeah, 40k doesn't need this, man. And I'm glad that, and I'm quite glad that GW will never bring this up ever again. But yeah, we're not going to end on that depressing note. We'll move on to the loss in the next one. Final bit. Let's go. So to end on the final note, the last 4 were chosen by the community. This one, however, is my own personal choice. And that is pretty quick, pretty simple, something to wrap this up with. And that is numbers. Now what do I mean by numbers? I mean is that numbers in 40k just don't make any sense. Now I'm not talking about power scaling, because people think numbers and power scaling are the same thing. They're not. I'm not really too fussed about how many space marines it takes to kill like a demon or something. That will always change because GW uses revolving writers. It's never going to be exactly the same. I'm talking about numbers when you look into them. What do I mean? Let's take the War for Armageddon as an example. It is believed that during the War for Armageddon, the Armageddon sector fielded roughly in the low millions worth of guardsmen. A popular number that I saw was 1.5 million, roughly. But again, low millions, anything below 5 million, I think is fair. The problem with that, though, is that a lot of sources I've seen say that hive cities are home to literally tens of billions in the lowest estimate, and oftentimes in the hundreds of billions. Now you see, that's the problem, because Armageddon itself is a hive world. And we consider that in the Armageddon sector there are other hive worlds and civilized worlds, mind you. That would mean that of the guardsmen raised from there, like 2, 3, 4 million to like 100 billion? It just doesn't really make sense, especially when you consider that the Imperium is supposed to be hyper-militaristic. It just doesn't make sense. And look, I understand with things like the Space Marines and Sisters of Battle, you want to be a little bit more reserved, you want them to be the better, you want them to have less realistic, more grandiose numbers, whatever, that I get. But for the standard old guardsmen, why can't we have like standard numbers? I mean, hell, we still don't even know the exact numbers for certain regiments. Again, I'm not asking for there to be 100% level codex account, I'm not asking for that. I'm just saying, I don't mind there being some discrepancy a little bit here, but the discrepancy between a couple thousand and, I don't know, 100 billion? It just ruins everything. Because how am I supposed to make sense of a world when the numbers don't make sense? It's something that's never really explained properly, and I don't really know why. Maybe it's an issue with the revolving writer system or something that GW just can't set it in stone, but to me personally, I think this is the worst part because numbers are how we quantify things. And if you aren't able to quantify something, you can't understand it. And if you can't understand it, can you really enjoy it? Hence why a lot of people scratch their heads when they get into 40k, especially the newer folks. But then of course there's always just the rule of cool and to not really worry about it, but sometimes the discrepancy just gets on my nerves. But yeah, there's plenty of examples of that all over, and I'm not going to carry on and on more and more. So in short, yeah, numbers don't make sense. Try and be a bit more consistent with stuff that doesn't really matter, aka Guardsmen. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know down below, what do you guys think? I mean, you guys can only really say that about the last one because the last one was mine. If you guys hate the others, hate each other and write it down in the comments. But, you know, fake hate. Please don't actually hate each other. If you hate, you get banned, Lamau. But hey, give me your picks for the worst lore. But I want to say massive thank you guys for watching, but even more massive thank you to my awesome members and patrons. Shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Miss Eddie 3, Miss Majora of the Void. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Bowen, Mr. Sean RL7, Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. Sergeant Cossack 68W173D, and Mr. That Guy. Shout out to my Corporal Gym members, Tremel the Math Kitty, Lord Rosarius, Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Bowen, Shauna Smithers, Gentle Salamander, The Witch of Warhammer, Major Doshinet, Edward King, and Mr. Overanalyze This. Finally, but certainly not least, shout out to my Royal Tier members, Mr. Thomas Lawns, Mr. Ivan_SPW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Ayeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortis Unum, Mr. CMDNA, Mr. Eric Massaro, Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken_Sakura333, Mr. Adrian Van Vuren, Morally Bankrupt, Matthew Peter, Joshly1320, Adrax1, Mr. Ethan Elam, U7L, and Mr. Kiri Khan. Thank you, I love you and appreciate you. Someday all the memberships get a bunch of awesome benefits, behind the scenes stuff, early access to these videos, your name at the end of each and every one of these videos, a personal shout out and thank you by yours truly, but most importantly, you get to help out with this channel. Remember, this will all be free, so whether you give your boy $1 or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! So ladies and gentlemen, if you really love this video, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Seriously, share this video, it helps a bunch. And if this video reaches 1,000 likes, we will get a part 2. And you guys again will be able to vote. And what do you think is the worst lore in all of Warhammer 40k? But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the Journal Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you so very much for watching. And be sure to say hello out there, boys and gals. And I'll catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. I stand by this. If you like the Daemonculaba lore, you are cooked. That and you probably smell.